This is Illuminate, the podcast about men with good hearts, open minds, and a desire to make the world better. Welcome to Illuminate. I'm your host, Chris Tidrick, and I'm here with Eddie Francis. Eddie is a brand strategist, speaker, award-winning broadcaster, and self-proclaimed leadership nerd. He hosts the personal leadership podcast For Our Edification, the employer branding podcast, I Want to Work There, and a new radio talk show, The Way Forward, on WBOK Radio in New Orleans. Welcome, Eddie. So glad to have you on the show.
Hey, Chris, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate you allowing me to come on and take up some time.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'd love to start these episodes with kind of diving into a bit of a deep question because I like to understand what motivates people.
Mhm.
So like, what's your why? Where do you find purpose? Like, what drives you?
Ethical leadership. I have this personal mission to promote ethical leadership in everything that I do. And it is something that has been instilled in me pretty deeply because I had been through some pretty negative work experiences. I had dealt with some people, like anybody else, who were just these questionable characters, and
Mm,
I've been done dirty, just like anybody
mhm.
else. But, the question that I've always had through a lot of these negative experiences is why are these people doing this? Especially if it's somebody who has a lot of influence, they have a big title, they have a lot of responsibility. Why did they do that? But then even in the home, a parent has these
Yes.
responsibilities,
Yeah.
and it's like, well, this is your kid. Why did you do that? And so, for me, ethical leadership is about what we do, even if we don't have a title. It's about what do we do with the responsibilities that we have as people, as human beings, and how do we allow people around us to feel whole, to feel heard, and all of those things. And so that is my why. I really, and even in brand strategy, I find places where I can dump in, these ethical leadership lessons or these ethical leadership thoughts. So yeah, that is my big why. I am somebody who has become just obsessed with trying to figure out how to work ethical leadership into every single thing that I do.
I love that, and I love how you talk about that it's work and it's home and family and all of those things. Like I've been through multiple leadership programs, and like I'll just be sitting there in the middle of the programs and be like, "Wait a minute, this applies to my personal life too."
Hmm.
Right?
Yep.
Leadership is just something that we as humans do in all these different arenas in our lives. So let's talk about your journey and where have you come from, what were some of the pivotal points along the way that kind of got you to this place where you feel that sense of purpose?
For me, the journey starts with where I was born. I was born and raised in New Orleans, Louisiana. Born, raised, and educated. I mean, high school, college, and started my career in New Orleans. And for years, I have tried to figure out what really makes New Orleans a special place. I mean, we always talk about the food and the music and that sort of thing. But one day, I was actually working on a branding project with someone, and they were, trying to figure out how to tell this story of New Orleans. And they say, New Orleans is a place that celebrates the human spirit. And I said, huh. I said that is really that makes sense. And so for me, that's where my journey began. My journey began in a city that really celebrates the human spirit, the human experience. We love joy down here.
Yeah.
A big influence in my life was my father. My dad was my hero. I looked up to him so much because he was a funny guy. He was an artist. He was a creator, but he was a dad. I'll never forget. This is one of my favorite stories about him. Um, at one point, I did stand up comedy. And I went to him because my dad was a singer. He actually was classically trained and he sang opera. And one day I went to him and I said, "Hey, I have this opportunity to go on the road, and these guys are asking me to go on. What do you think? What should I do?" And he looked at me and he said, "I actually had a contract in the Metropolitan Opera." and I turned it down. And I said,
Mm.
I was like, wait, what?
Yeah.
I was like, you mean to tell me I could have been born in New York? And and he said, well, let me ask you. He said, do you want a family? And I said, yeah. He said, going on the road might not be the best idea.
Yeah. It's
And he
always sacrifices, right?
yeah, and he
Yeah.
said, if you really want a family and you want to keep them together, he said, that's why I turned down that contract. I knew I wanted a family. I knew I wanted my family to stay together. So that's what makes my dad my hero. Just being able to get that kind of advice. Another pivotal point was the high school I went to. I went to an all boys African American Catholic high school in New Orleans, St. Augustine High School. We've produced judges, a mayor. We've produced city council people, professional athletes. The CEO of Carnival Cruise Lines is one of our alumni. I mean, so we have produced all these alumni, and one of the things that we were taught that no matter where you are, no matter where you go, no matter where you go, you have yourself, and you should be proud of yourself, and all you need is yourself and the people around you. Figure out how to rally the people around you. Always create a team, and love that team. And but be proud of yourself as a man first. And so that was a big lesson. The second, another influence in my life, another pivotal moment in my life was becoming a member of my fraternity, Alpha Phi Alpha. And that was a huge thing for me because I was actually kind of a quiet kid. When I became an alpha, that is where I found my voice. Um, I would say the other pivotal point in my life was when I got into my career. Like anybody else, I had some bad bosses. And they were some pretty toxic characters. And, again, back to my why, I just asked this question, like, you have this authority. What, why? Why do you treat people like this? Why does everybody have to feel bad about themselves around you? And then grad school. I actually got my graduate degree at 50. I'm 54 now. And I got my grad degree at 50, and that was a huge moment in my life, because number one, I didn't think I was going to go to grad school. I fought it off as long as I could. And then I decided to marry this woman with a PhD. So the pressure was on to at least get, you know,
Yeah.
the
Right.
pressure,
Yeah,
the pressure was,
you had to level up.
yeah, the level
Yeah.
up,
Yeah.
I'll punted my coverage. So she put the pressure on and she said, it would be nice for you to have a doctorate, but at least get a master's. And I was like, oh, okay, fine. But it was
Yeah.
the greatest experience for me to get that master's degree from Tennessee State University. And I would say the other pivotal moment was meeting this Dr. Leek Francis, who I live with every day.
Yeah.
Meeting Halima, that was another pivotal moment. So I've had these really great pivotal moments throughout my life that have really they've kept me in a really good place. And I felt so fortunate. And there were times that I took it all for granted, every single bit of it. But yeah, those are the pivotal moments that have really made me who I am.
So can you talk a little bit more about, I'm kind of fascinated by the idea of an all boys, all African
Yeah.
American high school. Can you talk a little bit more about what that experience was like for you?
It was fantastic. I mean, so the first thing is you have to put into perspective that the school was founded in 1951 during the Jim Crow era, in the Deep South. And so you have to imagine that for the founders of the school, the Josephite priests and brothers, who are dedicated to serving the African American community, it was really rough for them. There was a lot of pushback. The Archdiocese of New Orleans was not really feeling this idea, right? But there's a story that one of our alumni tells about how he was just fascinated and I want to say it was Sidney Barthélemy, one of the mayors of New Orleans. As a matter of fact, it was Mayor Barthélemy, and Barthélemy was mayor back in the '90s, and he said that when he arrived at St. Aug, he's sitting in a classroom with all these other black boys, and he was fascinated that a white priest was referring to all the students as Mister. And he said that just made a huge difference because everybody had this sense of self actualization. And not only that, it all manifested itself in the athletics program being a fantastic athletics program. The marching band, we call ourselves the best band in the land, and we mean it. And so the marching band has a fantastic reputation. Actually, just celebrated D-Day in Normandy. So the marching band did go to France to help celebrate D-Day, and so it is literally a school that has made such a name for itself across the country. And so when you are this kid from New Orleans, from humble beginnings, and you walk in, and the first thing that happens is you're referred to as Mister. But then on top of all of that, you see this tradition of winning and success all around you. And, that makes an impression at 13 years old, at
Yeah.
14 years old. And so, especially for a young black boy. And so when you walk in and you see this, you're like, okay, I want to feel this good all the time. So what we wind up doing is we wind up becoming really, really competitive people. I was on a speech and debate
Mhm.
team, and it was our expectation that we were going to win every single tournament. We
Yeah.
didn't, but we walked in every single tournament thinking, no, we're going to win. And so, and for black boys, if you just really understand the context of the upbringing of African American people in the deep South, for a black boy to walk into a place where he is told, you are the best and you're going to
Mm.
be the best, and that is just, that's magic to your ears. And then it's not just people telling you this, you actually do win stuff. You
Yeah.
win the trophies. You place first place at the science fair, and then you place first place at the speech and debate tournament, and you watch your football team pummel somebody and for the district championship. So all of that stuff really, really makes a difference with St. Aug. And then on top of that, you have all these alumni that you look up to, and you're saying, yeah, I want to be like Carl Weathers. He's one of our alumni. I want to be
Yeah.
Carl Weathers and Rocky. I want to be John Baptiste on that stage. You look
Yeah.
up to these people thinking, yeah, I'm going to be next. I'm going to be Kerry Kittles, who's going to have a place in the Villanova Hall of Fame. So that's St. Aug, man. And our mascot is the Purple Knight, and so we have this unique mascot on top of all of this. So that's us, man. And as you can tell, I mean, I could go all day, and it is a legacy school. So my brother graduated in 1980. I graduated in 88. I have two nephews who graduated in 08 and 10. My son graduated in 22. I have an uncle who graduated in 68. And so, and countless cousins went to
Yeah.
the school. So that's St. Aug, man. That's the Purple Knights.
Yeah, I really appreciate what you said about how, like, what you heard about yourself made
Mm-hmm.
such a difference, right? I think there's this thing in today's society that says, don't care about what other people say about you. Don't care about what other people think about you. And I think
Yeah.
there's some truth to that, right? We shouldn't
Yeah.
we shouldn't allow other people's opinions to necessarily destroy our self-esteem. But if you flip that around, if people are saying great things about you and setting expectations for you, that makes you do that level up that you were just talking
Uh-huh.
about before, right? There's something that matters, right? What people say to you about yourself matters in our world.
Chris, that is such a great point. So, one of the things that I do is that I am an adjunct college instructor, and one of the classes that I teach is on cultural competence. And one of the things that we talk about is identity. Identity is not just what you say about yourself; it's what other people say about you. And so, you're right. I mean, I think that, and this is this is why social media just drives me nuts sometimes, because people have this "I said what I said" zero sum argument attitude a lot of times. And you and I connected on Threads, and I see it on Threads all the time, where people are like, unpopular opinion, and the unpopular opinion posts are my favorite ones, because I'm going, that's actually a very popular opinion.
Yeah,
but
no, yeah,
but but you see a lot of these posts where people just, they want to shut down the conversation. I said it, it's done, that's it. And you're going,
yeah,
really? Is that it? And
yeah.
and so I think that to have the attitude, don't care about what other people say about you, is really, yes, you're right. I agree with you 100%. To a degree, I get it. Yes. But at some point, you do have to pay attention, and you do have to ask, well, why are people saying this about me?
Feedback
Um,
feedback is a valuable source of growth.
It is, and let me
Like,
tell you,
yeah,
and I'm very open about this, Chris. I'm in mental health therapy, and I have a fantastic therapist who has really helped me to pay attention to things. And one of the things that she and I talk about is, she walks me through this stuff, and she's like, okay, well, why did it matter to you that someone said that about you? And I'll walk through those reasons. And she said, okay, well, since it matters, and since this is why it matters, what do you want to do about it? And the way she walks me through these things really helps me build a much healthier sense of self-esteem,
yeah,
and maintain a healthier sense of self-esteem. It's not me beating my chest. It's really me just figuring out who I am, being more in the moment, being mindful. So mindful, so demure. I'm joking. But really being much more in the moment about,
yeah,
like they say, checking in with myself and really asking, well, why is it that this person says this about me? Yeah, it gets to me, but now I have to figure out, why are they saying it in the first place?
yeah. Is there a
A-
kernel of truth in the middle of it? Right?
right. At
Yeah,
some point, there's something that I did or said that made this person believe this, and I have to hold myself accountable for that. Even if I think it's not the truth, there's still something I did to really help inform that opinion.
yes, yeah,
And so that was a hard lesson for me to learn, man. Really hard for me to learn. It took me years on that one, but I finally
yeah,
got to this point of, yeah, if people are saying it, then pay attention to it. You don't have
yeah,
to like it, you don't have to agree with it, but pay attention to it.
yeah. So I want to touch also on, you talked about bad bosses,
Hmm.
in that being something that has inspired you to have this focus on ethical leadership.
Yeah.
Give me an example of, like, what's that bad boss? I think there are a lot, there are a lot of leaders out
Yeah.
there, especially a lot of male leaders that don't actually have the self-awareness that they're doing something that is hurting their organization and hurting the people within their organization. So talk a little bit about kind of, what does a bad boss look like to you? Like, what was your experience with them?
I've had male bad bosses, I've had female bad bosses. Most of them were male. One in particular, I actually told the story on another podcast. One of them cut my salary in half because he gave me a goal. It wasn't realistic. And I didn't realize at the time how unrealistic the goal was. I was really green in that area. And he pulled me into his office one day and he just said, "Yeah, you didn't meet the goal, so I'm going to cut your salary." And I'm going, "There's got to be something illegal about this." And so, I'm like, "This doesn't feel right." But this person actually was part of the reason when I got to grad school. So I got my master's in strategic leadership. My final master's project was a case study on narcissistic leadership and the effects it has on followership. He heavily influenced that. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, and I just found that he was so this person just man, this guy just really had this thing. He was so invested in self-importance, um, you know, e- really grandiose, and did not really appreciate other people's opinions. And which, by the way, those are some markers of narcissistic behavior, if not full blown narcissism. And so, um, that was one example of a boss who I was just like, why, dude? Like, I was like, well, like what? And it got to the point when I got into my graduate studies. It got to the point I was like, okay, now I'm at a point where I'm really trying to figure out what really drives his behavior. And you find out, if you research narcissism and all this stuff, which I did. I mean, I did it for 2 years. I researched it for 2 years. You find out that a big part of it is just this just ridiculous sense of insecurity that people have.
Absolutely.
And it's just like,
Absolutely.
oh,
Yeah.
it's like, so you're doing this to other people because you feel like you lost something, or
Yeah.
you feel like you're losing something. It's like,
It,
dude,
it,
is that what this is
if I look back at, like, me as a professional,
about? Hmm.
every place where I wished I had done something differently, right? That I didn't have the behavior I wanted, it was all back to my insecurity.
Yeah.
Like, it was
Yep.
me trying to cope with that insecurity. It's
Hmm.
absolutely true. Yeah.
Yeah, there was one moment I had. I used to be the director of communications and marketing at a university here in New Orleans, and I hired this social media coordinator. She came in, and in between the time the last social media coordinator left and the new one came in, I started working on social media. So I started figuring all this stuff out. I'm like, oh man, okay, we're starting to pick up on followers, the engagement is, I'm figuring, my little marketing brain is going crazy because I'm just figuring that I found a pot of gold. And so she comes in and I'm sitting with her one day, and I would do one-on-ones every 2 weeks and with all my team. And she comes in and I start going, okay, now when you get on Instagram, blah, 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 I found this. And when you do this, blah, 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 blah. Next one. I'm doing the same thing. Blah, 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 blah. Third one-on-one. I'm doing the same thing. And I noticed her body language started shifting a little bit. And she started to close herself off from me a little bit during the one-on-ones. And I'm going, what's going on? And I'm like, I'm annoying her. I'm annoying her because I'm micromanaging her. And I
Yeah.
was going, Eddie, you don't have to do that. You hired her for a reason. Let her do her thing.
Yeah.
And so I literally said this. I said, okay, I said, you know what? Let me shut up and tell me what you think. And finally, I let her talk. And so
Yeah.
she started talking, and I was like, Eddie, what's wrong with you? It's like, dude, you don't have anything to prove. You're the director. You're her boss.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you hired her to make you look good. So let her make you look good. If we have to put it, if we have to go there with it, let her do her thing and you'll be just fine. You don't have to control all this stuff.
Yeah. Hire great people and let them do their work.
And you know what?
Yeah.
And I was so glad that I was observant. I was glad that I listened. I was glad
Yeah.
that at some point I learned to shut up. I always, this is the other thing I always tell people when people ask me about my high school, when they ask me, what is it with you guys? You guys treat it like it's a fraternity. And it's like, well, yeah, it was my first fraternity. And they'll ask me, well, what was it about that school that has you got what's the secret sauce that you guys become so successful a lot of times? And I said, and I always tell people they taught us to do three things: sit down, shut up, and listen.
Hmm.
And in that moment with my team member, I sat down, I shut up, and I listened. And she wound up doing a bang up job of social. Like the university social just skyrocketed with her leadership. And then, I was so great. I was so happy to see this. She actually left the university and became an assistant director of marketing somewhere else. And I had been talking to her about that. But to your point, though, about the insecurity, yeah, I had to really, again, check in with myself and
Yeah.
realize that I was being insecure. I thought I was
Yeah.
doing something so great, but I was being insecure.
So I want to switch up a little bit. Growth is like this incredibly important topic for me, and personal growth, and how we get better as human beings, how we get better as men.
Hmm.
You mentioned you graduated in '88 from high school, so
Hmm.
so you and I are among the Gen X elders,
Yeah.
um, and and so we've seen a lot of change. Like there's been a lot of the world is like pretty radically different today than it
Yeah.
was when we were in high school, when we were sort of forming. I kind of feel like growth always requires deconstruction.
Yeah.
And so what are some of the foundational things that you've had to deconstruct in your life to sort of emerge as a better human being on the other side?
So the downside to my upbringing is that I became so idealistic about so many things, and I would say not principled, but over principled about a lot of things. This is
Okay.
it. This is how it goes, and so what I've had to do to deconstruct that is I've had to learn to accept things as they are and control what I can control. I mean, the serenity prayer is very real, right? And so,
Yeah.
if you're Christian, I mean, it is a very real thing. And that has been so hard for me throughout my life to learn that there are only certain things that I can control. I had one boss who she was so great. I loved working under her. And these wacky things would happen. I was a director of public relations at the time, and she was a vice chancellor. And there were these things that would just happen. I mean, working on a college campus, in marketing is just it can be wild. It can be a wild ride because you put your marketing plan together and it blows up by the second week of the semester.
Yeah.
And it's just like, well, there goes that marketing plan because
No, I hear you. I work in higher ed, so
so
I
there you
completely
go.
understand.
There
Yeah.
you go.
Yeah.
So higher. What do you do in higher ed?
So I run IT for a college business. So
No. Okay, so there,
yeah,
yeah, there
yeah,
you get it. Okay, yes. Okay, we are here.
yeah,
So yeah, I mean, yeah, late May through late July, I'm putting together this fantastic marketing plan,
yep,
and I'm going, oh, we're gonna win, and then right after orientation, you have your first emergency of the
yeah,
academic year, or
yeah,
going into orientation, and
yeah,
so and incoming freshmen, the gift that keeps on giving. So you have all these things that happens. There's a gas leak on campus, just things that start happening.
yeah,
In New Orleans, there's a hurricane approaching, and so I had this boss when all these things would happen, she would just go, "It is what it is." And Chris, it would drive me nuts when she would say it. And I would say, "What do you mean it is what it is? No, no, no." And I'm just walking around growling and stuff. And I'm going,
yeah.
it's not, it isn't is what it is. And so, but when I got to the point of understanding that there are only certain things you can control in life. Life, as we say, life is life, and life is gonna life as much as it needs
Yeah.
to. And when I got to the point where I learned, okay, listen, what can I control? And yeah, you're going to hear this a lot throughout this podcast. My reaction, I can control how I
Yeah.
react to these things. That's when it is what it is made sense to me, and that's when she made more sense to me. And I'm going, oh, okay. And so that's been a big part of my growth, is just really deconstructing the fact that as much as I want to control how things are, and they're just things, it's just not going to happen. What I really need to focus on is how I react to things. And this whole thing about being in a moment and being mindful, I mean, when I tell you this is really, really new to me,
Yeah.
figuring all that out, that is a big, big part of it. I mean, the other day I was the other day I was on my way somewhere, and I'm on the interstate, and it's the usual interstate hijinks, right? Usual driving hijinks. Somebody cuts in front of you, somebody's in a passing lane and they won't pass anybody. It's the usual stuff. Somebody's passing on your right and you're trying to get into the slow lane so you can get away from everybody. And at one point, I let some of my favorite, words go that I won't say on this podcast, and I let some of them, and I'm sitting there going, okay, all right, Eddie, go. First of all, Eddie, get into the passing lane because you need some time to cool off. So I get all the way over to the right, and I really started going through the exercise of, okay, so why did I say that? Now, why did I get so upset? And it was just
Yeah.
it was, and I was sitting there going, this really is much more of a struggle for me than I realized, and I need to figure out what a lot of this looks like. So yeah, man, I mean that whole accepting things as they are and controlling what I can control, that has been a huge part of my personal growth and deconstructing some behaviors.
So much of our negative emotion is us trying to control things we can't control,
Mhm. Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
That is so true. So
Mhm.
one of the things that's in the tagline of this Illuminate podcast is open minds.
Mhm.
And I'm a believer that an open mind requires you to continuously learn,
Mhm.
right? That
Yep.
that's it's they kind of go hand in hand. Maybe one causes the other, and then the other causes.
Mhm.
Learning goes into having an open mind, and having an open mind, stimulates you to learn. So, how do you make sure that you're always learning?
Um, and I'm glad. Yeah, I know. I noticed the open mind thing, and I was like, oh man, this could be kind of deep. But the way that I'm continuing to learn is, for me, is figuring out that there's a question to be asked.
Hmm.
Um, One of the things about me is that I have not been the greatest at asking questions a lot of time. Again, this is one of those areas where, I grew up, I was raised Catholic, went to, I literally went to Catholic schools from kindergarten to college, through college.
So did
Uh,
I.
yeah. And
Yeah.
so the downside of that, while I did enjoy that upbringing, the downside of that is that again, I became too idealistic. I became too principled about things. There was a right and a wrong way to do everything, and so a lot of times I would not ask the questions. I would jump straight to judgment a lot of times, and I know that's not necessarily what the purpose is when it comes to religion and Catholicism. Is really how we treat it and what we do with it. But you get so much of this morality into your life,
You get so dogmatic.
you get so
Yeah.
dogmatic that
Yeah.
you start to, I think at a point, what we tend to do as people of free will, I think what we tend to do, or as beings of free will, I think we get to a point where we hold on to the reins of what we learned a little too tightly, and
Yeah.
we don't understand that there is still growth to be done, and you
Yeah.
have to work your way through all of that stuff, regardless of your faith walk, regardless of whatever your ideology is. Like, you have to really figure out how to walk through all of that stuff, and how to develop within all of it, so that you can develop a healthy, balanced mindset. And so for me, the way I have been learning more is by asking more questions. Again, getting to this point of, well, why did that boss do that? Why did that boss behave that way? Instead of saying, nah, that guy's a punk, I can't stand him. you know,
Yeah.
if he gets hit by a truck, oh well, you know what I mean? So instead of going that way, is actually, even though it's such a negative experience, developing this sense of empathy enough to ask the questions, and to learn
Yeah.
a lot about them, so that you can fill your cup a little bit more, um and then also to be prepared for the next time you meet someone like that. And so that's what it's been, just asking the right questions, it just increasing the understanding also that everybody's journey is everybody's journey. You can't control other people's journeys, um and uh and then just really being in this space of just saying, yes, this person did that, I don't understand it, let me park at not understanding, and work to understand, as opposed to going straight to judgment. And so that has been a big part of my learning, especially the last few years. That has been a huge part of my learning.
That's wonderful. I I like to talk about community.
Hmm.
And you mentioned, your high school upbringing. There was a strong focus on, you are responsible for yourself,
Hmm. Yeah.
right? I think, in certain segments of our society, there's this like absolute hero worship of the lone wolf.
Hmm.
But you also mentioned that you were taught you need your team
Hmm.
around
Yeah.
you. You mentioned a few minutes ago that you rely on your therapist to help you work through things. Community and support, I think, is a really important piece of who we are, as men, as humans. So,
Mhm.
who do you rely on for support, and where do you find and create community?
I love the way you frame this, because I have this thing that I say sometimes. I say it actually a lot. I say this: success is a team sport. You know, and for me, I mean, right now, my biggest support comes from my wife.
Mm,
Halima Lee Francis. She is everything, and it's because she literally is one of the smartest people I've ever met. Um, but also one of the most caring people I've ever met at the same time. And at the same time, she'll hold you accountable. And so she just has these three things that she does extremely well,
yeah, yeah,
and so she is a huge part of it. I also have, as part of my community, I have these really great professional colleagues, who I have I've really met and I've gotten to know over the past couple of years. All in the higher ed marketing community, actually. And these are people. This has got to be the first group of within a professional network who, if you call, that I've met in my experiences, who, when I have called and said, "Hey, I need something," they're just like, "Okay, fine, what?" And they do it. And they're very open about saying, if anybody needs anything, I maybe I can't help you solve the problem, but I can at least help you talk through it. And they do it. They really, really are some of the most open, generous people with their time. And so they have become an extremely important community to me. Shouts out to the American Marketing Association. And then and then I do keep my male community very close. My fraternity, in African American fraternities and sororities, we are very active on the alumni level.
Yeah.
So so I do, I do, I am part of an alumni chapter. But then also my fellow Purple Knights, the alumni, we all we talk, we communicate, and we're, so many of us are just there for one another. Nobody's too big for anybody else, and so those are three major parts of my community that, are three parts of my community that I really, really, enjoy and rely on a whole lot.
What specifically does like male friendship, like what role does it play in your life?
Is really having someone who has had similar lived experiences, especially as a married man, especially as a father, being able to just have that conversation and say, "Hey, did did your wife ever do this? And, did she ever make
Yeah.
this decision?" And you were like, "Why?" And they're like, "Oh man, yes." So being
Yeah.
able to say, "Okay," I think a lot of cases is being able to say, "It's not just me. This is happening to someone else."
Yeah.
Health issues, being able to say, "Hey man, I have this thing going on. I don't know, it's weird. It's just my heart just did this weird thing." It's like, "Oh yeah, man, do this, da 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 da, eat this, eat that, stop doing this, stop doing that, especially as guys, blah blah blah." And so to being able to have that, I will say, one of the things that my fraternity has taken up, that has been very helpful to a lot of our members, is we have taken up a lot of internal health initiatives. And so mental health
That's
is one thing
fantastic.
that we
Yeah.
have tackled big time internally. And then also during September, every month, we urge all the members of the fraternity to get prostate checks. Um, and then just a myriad of other things, being able to say, "Hey, listen, this issue happened, with a woman, especially if it's a black woman. This issue happened. This is what we need to do as men. This is how we need to,
Yeah.
step in and deal with this issue." But I think is just really, when it comes to talking to other men, you just have that guy who you can say, "Hey, listen, nobody's going to understand this, but you will." And so here is the thing. Like, for instance, I really think that this podcast, I mean, I salute you and I congratulate you on launching it, because I really think having this forum for men to talk to one another about things like mindfulness, and that is something that is huge, because personally, I'm the one who is sitting there going, "Oh man, as a speaker, I'm always looking for an opportunity to speak." So I'm looking through all these calls for speakers, and it's like, "Oh, it's a mindfulness retreat, women only." Well, okay, can't do that one. Okay,
Yeah.
Oh, great, this is a leadership conference, women only. Oh, can't do that one. so, so
Yeah.
I think for me, just to know that there are other men who are making spaces for men to talk about things, is just really, it's really helpful.
Absolutely, absolutely. I want to I want to jump back a couple of minutes, because I want to make a comment about like the respect that you have for your wife is like I can feel it. It's palpable.
Oh yeah,
Like
yeah.
there's this, and that's so amazing and wonderful. there was a guy that lived in my dorm when I went to Notre Dame,
Mhm.
and this guy was in the room right next to me. I remember him saying, and this is like my 19-year-old brain, like processed this, and he said, I don't want to marry somebody that's smarter than I am because I couldn't stand being the dumbest person in the house. I'm like, that is the stupidest thing I have ever heard. Like why? And so like to hear sort of the complete flip side of that from you about
Mhm.
how you appreciate your wife's intelligence and
Mhm.
and what she brings into the world and what she brings into your life. That's just it like hits me right in the feels. So
Oh yeah, but
yeah.
that is very much a young guy thing. I mean, I've heard the same thing a lot of times. But I also hear from older guys. They're older guys who will say, "Oh, here she goes with this, making me feel small," and I'm like, "No, all she did was say something. She said something that you didn't know, and that's okay." Um,
Yeah.
but here's the thing. I think part of that influence, though, my dad was my hero, but my mom was she was highly intelligent. I mean, she was a math and science teacher. She had a degree in chemistry. The college that she went to, she was the first black woman on her homecoming court. And at that time, for a black woman to graduate, as one of the few in the college with a degree in chemistry, right, that was a big, big, big deal. My sister is an Ivy League alumna, and she graduated with a degree in engineering as well in the 70s. Again, a black woman graduating a degree in engineering in the Ivies, that's something. So
Yeah.
for me, I grew up with these women, but there is that insecurity though. Like when there is an insecurity when I'm sitting there and I'm talking about something, and she looks at me, she goes, that's not true, right? And I'm going, well, what do you mean? And she'll say, well, blah 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 blah. She'll give me the background. I'm going, huh, how about that?
Yeah.
And but the ego side of me is going, oh, Eddie,
Yeah.
you idiot. But the thing is this, I mean, again, I think this is one of the reasons that one of my big sayings to people is success is a team sport. And so, yeah, dude, have that really smart woman in the house with you. That
Yeah.
is gonna really, really help. And it's funny, talking about male insecurity, what your friend said in college, it's funny that the way he viewed it was that if she's the smartest person in the house, that makes him the dumbest person in the house. And I'm just like, well, actually, no, it doesn't. I mean, why can't both of you be like wicked smart?
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
she just
Yeah.
happens to be the one who has an edge, but you still can do your thing. You are still brilliant in whatever it is that you do.
Yeah.
It's just that she comes in and she comes in like a little hurricane and does her thing. And so I feel like that's what it is. And and it's actually interesting, but Halim and I actually have these conversations a lot of times about what someone's individual brilliance is. And
Yeah.
for her, she's a sociologist, she's an educator, she is someone who understands fundraising and philanthropy. She did her dissertation on it, that sort of thing. For me, is marketing, is communication.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, I was her public speaking coach. And so I'll coach her on how to create the language on something, how to make it simple but effective, and I'll coach her on how to really frame something that she wants to talk about in a meeting and something like that. She'll coach me on understanding the background of something, why people behave the way they do, why communities. So it for us. It's an exchange, and it's an exchange that we are both extremely proud of.
Life is a group project, right?
It is the biggest group
Yeah.
project ever.
Yeah, and it's the thing that college kids hate the most.
It is.
Yeah. So,
Yeah, I
um,
didn't have too much fun group projects.
right. So we are now at the time in the podcast where we do a lightning round. So I've
Mhm.
got 11 questions for you, kind of rapid fire. Don't need to like go like super deep into any of
Okay.
them. So, what are your top 3 values?
Well, this is an easy one. Resilience, intellectual flexibility, and humor.
Who is one role model that you've had in your life?
Nelson J. Francis, my dad.
Who do you hope you are a role model for?
Stephen A. Francis, my son.
And how, like, give me some. I'm going to actually ask you to go a little deeper on that. Like,
Yeah.
how do you want to be a role model to your son?
I want him to develop a sense of legacy. I want him to take care of himself. just just take care of his health. That's one of the things. As we get older, we figure this out. It's like, hey, if you have your health, you have everything.
Yeah,
You used to hear older people say it, and you just be like, ah, okay. But now it's like, oh yeah, you're right.
yeah.
So yeah, I mean, that's how I want him to I want him to hear me talking about taking care of myself. I want him to hear me talk about what it means to be the son of Nelson and the grandson of Emile and Alton Edward Lear I want to hear about that. I want him to hear me talk about legacy and what it means to be, and then also the legacy from my wife's family and yeah, so definitely
What's the one way that you make the world a better place for others?
accepting people for who they are and making people well, okay, you said one way, right?
Well, you can add some.
Oh, good. Accepting people, yeah, because I feel strongly about both of these. Accepting people for who they are and maybe making people laugh. That's one of the best sounds in the world to me. People laughing.
What's the hardest thing about being you in today's world?
Going back to what I talked about earlier, sometimes sometimes just being too idealistic and being way too principled about things. That is the hardest thing about me right now.
Yeah, the world isn't black and white.
No.
Yeah, nuance is like I think the superpower of the future.
It is. It is. I love
Yeah,
that. Oh man, that's
yeah.
that's quotable, man. You should quote that's a good quotable by you.
Maybe we'll put that out on social later today.
Yeah.
Um,
Unpopular opinion.
yeah, unpopular opinion. Yeah, exactly, exactly. So, what is your favorite emotion?
Joy.
What's your least favorite emotion?
Oh, sadness.
Hmm. So, what brings you the most joy in life?
I had to really think about this one. Uh, you know what dancing does?
Dancing.
I have I was trying to figure this out one day, a conversation with my therapist, and I was just like,
Yeah.
I don't know what brings me, and I'm sitting there thinking about all these things that I really love doing. But I think the times that I really feel like myself and I'm having fun and I'm having joy and my creativity is taking over a little is when I dance. So I need to dance more. Yeah.
Excellent. What makes you most proud of yourself?
That I can make people laugh.
So you kind of already answered this one, but let's dive maybe a little bit deeper. Like, where can you feel the most yourself?
Actually, dancing would be it, but I do have a background in theater. I was a theater minor. Like I said, I've done stand up, and a lot. So besides dancing, another area where I can feel the most like myself is on stage because I have this tendency to cut loose when I'm on stage. So when I have a speaking gig, it is so funny that when I have a speaking gig, people who see me and they're going, "That's you. You are not the guy I was just sitting in a meeting with." And I'm going, yeah, because on stage, I'm really free. So
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, I feel so much like myself when I'm on
So
stage.
that's what speaking gigs. You mentioned you had a theater background, and when you first started this, I'm like, oh, that's interesting because like in theater, you're pretending to be someone else, and so I'm like, I was trying to, but I can understand the piece of being on stage and doing speaking, and yeah.
It's actually so. Here's the thing that's really interesting about acting is that it's not so much that you're pretending to be someone else. You're tapping into a side of yourself that
Mhm.
that you
I love
really
that.
that
Love
you
that.
really really bring out. And I there's something that Denzel Washington said once, and I love this response. And they were talking to him about the role that he played in Training Day. And a lot of black folks were upset because they were just like, why does he get the Academy Award for being a villain? But but something I found out in watching him do interviews about that movie is that he loved that role. And the one person asked him this question. They asked him, what is it like to play a villain? And he said, I don't think Alonzo was a villain. I think Alonzo did his job too well. And I was like,
Mhm.
huh, I love that response. As somebody who has acted before, I really understood his response really well.
Yeah.
And so that's what acting is really, is
Yeah.
really more tapping into another side of yourself, I think.
I love that. I love that perspective. Thanks for
Hmm.
sharing that.
Hmm.
So, final question. It's a way to wrap up our conversation today. What's the one thing that you hope people take away from this conversation?
I really hope that people take away that it is okay to think another way than you're used to thinking. It's also important to feel joy in the things that you're doing. And also, and probably most importantly, even though this wasn't explicitly talked about in the conversation, allowing other people to feel joy about who they are. I mean, you may not
Mm,
necessarily understand why this person is this person. You may not understand why this person is making this life choice. But I think the important thing to ask is, are they finding joy in it? And if they are, then you don't have to understand it. And so yeah, I really hope that those are a couple of things that people take away from the conversation, that you just stay adaptable, and
yeah.
just be willing to move with life, and experience joy, and allow other people to experience joy in what they do and the decisions that they make.
That's wonderful. This idea of making room for your own joy and other people's joy.
Hmm.
I love that. Eddie, thank you so much for the conversation today. Really enjoyed this. I have this feeling like throughout this entire series of episodes that I'm going to do, I'm just making new friends. And I kind of feel like I just want to continue this conversation forever. So this has been amazing. Thank you for your time today, and best wishes, and keep up the hard work.
Thank you so much, Chris.
Yep.
Appreciate you, man. And yet, let's stay connected by all means. I really appreciate. Again, I appreciate your out of the out of all the people who responded to your threads. I really appreciate that I'm someone who got an opportunity to have this conversation with you. Thank you.
Okay. Be well. You can learn more about Illuminate at illuminate.substack.com. We are also streaming on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, and YouTube. Thanks for listening and watching, and we'll see you at the next episode of Illuminate.